Hello, welcome again to Sport Unlocked. If you hit subscribe, we land in your feed automatically, and we're always grateful for a review. If you're enjoying listening to Martyn Ziegler from The Times, Tariq Panja from The New York Times, and myself, Rob Harris from Sky News.
Rob, you said the listeners, if they like what we're doing, to write in or email. Also, if you don't like what we're doing, which is probably more likely, do also write in, email, and all the rest of it. We're looking to get all of your views across.
Mainly so listeners can help to resolve our perhaps difference of opinions, our discussions about why we had 2 episodes in the last week, 2 shorter episodes. One was about 15 minutes, another was a 30-minute special on the IOC, partly out of necessity over the way we had to edit and record them. But do you prefer 2 shorter ones during the week or one longer one? sportunlockpod@gmail.com or at sportunlock. You can private message us on, or publicly so, on every social media network.
Let us know what you think. We don't know how long it's going to be yet. Well, let's see how long we get to.
Yeah, more to keep those governing bodies on their toes. And you've seen 2 pods land. I wonder if they're listening in the Oval Office. Certainly a keen football interest there, because as of this week, behind Donald Trump, as he's been signing all those executive orders and giving his views on the Middle East, a World Cup has appeared behind him.
The trophy's there. So maybe a little gift from FIFA ahead of the 2026 World Cup. But he's also involved in other sporting activities this week. I mean, I think this is amazing that he's going to be the first sitting US president to go to the Super Bowl. I mean, it's just, why has never any other president gone to the Super Bowl? Just baffling.
Is it too much of an added security challenge?
Yeah, I mean, but it's like the biggest game in American sport. Obviously, us 3 Brits talking about it. We don't know why the US presidents wouldn't have gone before, whether there's any protocol reasons or anything like that. I can't imagine why not.
Queen Elizabeth II, I think, stopped going to the FA Cup final in the 1970s, and not seen King Charles there since his accession to the throne.
Is that in case she sort of jumped up if one of the teams scored? Is that?
We only saw her do that at the horse racing. As for that World Cup behind Donald Trump, it reminded us how the World Cup intersects with that other big issue of the week, because, of course, the United States co-hosting with Mexico and Canada, and the battle over tariffs.
And that trophy, I think maybe one of the reasons will be that he kind of has some sort of ownership, or has shown some sort of ownership or claim for getting the tournament rights to the USA. And obviously he likes winning, so much winning. And that trophy might be a symbol of what he's done.
Yeah, it shows how quickly news cycles move on. The week started with that trade war with Canada and Mexico, which is perhaps thawed a bit, but a reminder of some of those extra challenges involving that 2026 World Cup. He certainly claims a lot of credit for winning that World Cup bid with FIFA, also for winning the Olympic contest as well for LA to host in 2028. But you've got to wonder what they were thinking of at the IOC. I don't think we've ever heard a US president talking about the IOC as we have Donald Trump this week, as he introduced that ban on transgender women taking part in women's sport, and hoping the IOC adopt it for the Olympics.
In Los Angeles in 2028, my administration will not stand by and watch men beat and batter female athletes, and we're just not going to let it happen, and it's going to end, and it's ending right now, and nobody's going to be able to do a damn thing about it, because when I speak, we speak with authority. And for the same reason, just to make sure, I'm also directing our Secretary of Homeland Security to deny any and all visa applications made by men attempting to fraudulently enter the United States while identifying themselves as women athletes, try and get into the games maybe where they are unable to get into the games.
There's been a lot of noise about this, hasn't there? If we look back at the Olympics, I think there's only ever been one transgender woman in competition. There was a weightlifter at the Tokyo Olympics. But apart from that, there certainly wasn't a transgender athlete taking part in women's competition who had been born male at the Paris Olympics. I don't think it's going to have a sort of huge effect.
No, it just becomes one of these parts of culture war. He's talking to his audience, isn't he? And we've got the elections for the IOC presidents coming up. They've all been asked about this. Most of them have said it's time for the IOC to actually engage with this. As we've seen, they've handed it out to the federations and sort of created a mess. I remember Kirsty Coventry, one of the candidates, saying, if she becomes elected, she'll be the person the IOC will be in charge of this.
Perhaps unlike some of Donald Trump's pronouncements, it's not an outlandish policy, is it? Because it's the same policy as we have in world athletics. Swimming have adopted it as well, and cricket internationally. So many sports have. It's just FIFA who are sort of prevaricating on concluding their review into it. It's perhaps more the tone that Donald Trump has adopted.
Also, is it the most important thing, really, for the US president in the first week of being in this office? Think about everything that's happening now, and he's waded into this, among other things. I just see it as a bit of kind of politics and talking to his audience rather than anything that's key to his platform right now.
And there's a question sort of how necessary and urgent it is, in the sense that more than 24 states already have a similar policy. There have been various legal challenges, largely Republican states. So it's already something in motion across the US. And to distill down how it's enforced, I don't think if you decide to hold a athletics event yourself in the United States, they're suddenly going to shut it down if you have transgender women. It's more those programs that have federal funding, so schools and colleges, is trying to ban transgender women taking part in those women's events. And we say transgender women, many on the Trump side in particular say we should be calling them men, and that's a lot of the social media abuse. Of course, athletes who've gone through male puberty and then have transitioned.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the most controversial issues in sport have not been around transgender athletes, but it's with athletes with differences of sexual development, which has been a big issue in athletics particularly, where athletes have been born and raised as girls, but may have like internal male sexual organs and have male levels of testosterone. That is a very, very much more difficult and tricky thing and this actually isn't covering that at all, and it probably shouldn't be either, because I don't think that should be some sort of federal law.
Although Donald Trump does refer, not directly by name in the case of this week, Iman Khalif, the Algerian boxer from the Paris Olympics, he calls her a man. She was identified as a woman. She was born as a woman, competing in women's sport, obviously highly contentious because of that disputed gender eligibility test from AIBA, but certainly brought up by Donald Trump when he had that East Room ceremony at the White House, surrounded by athletes and young girls as he signed the executive order.
Just completely offensive, by the way. Just forget whether the issues with sport. Iman Khalif is a woman. And this is the President of the United States calling her a man. This is from the highest office. I mean, this is how far we've come with all of this. Just on the surface of it, it's just really, really offensive, isn't it?
Yeah, but he's used it on the campaign trail. He uses it to try to get votes, and certainly it seems some were swayed by it. You know, he is obviously highlighting that broader issue of sporting fairness and safety, and there are risks of those who've gone through male puberty of having those physical advantage, which can distort competition or make it unsafe. On the other side, a marginalised community feeling even more under attack from the Trump administration. And as you say, something that isn't, or perhaps shouldn't be, a priority when he's got the economy to sort out. He's got the Middle East, of which there are constant interventions on as well to be dealing with.
Yeah, fine, he could do that. Just you don't need to be
and also
that
he's got his World Cup plans. I mean, it looks like it may just, if he gets his way and Canada becomes a 51st state, the 2026 World Cup will just be in Mexico and the US.
But one person in the world of sport who seems to welcome it, because it might help his own electoral chances in a presidential election, Seb Coe, he reposted the link to the executive order, saying preserving the integrity of competition in the female category is a fundamental principle of the sport of athletics, and we know everything starts in schools. Establishing clear, unambiguous policies is a critical first step. And Tariq, you encountered Seb Coe in Lausanne at those presidential hustings.
And I asked about Donald Trump, and then this is what he had to say.
First of all, I don't think any American president is going to set out with the games in their own backyard in a few years' time, set out to do anything other than to make them the best games ever. I can't imagine anybody, any political leader sitting anywhere in the world that wouldn't want that. Secondly, I don't think there's one of the size fits all. I like to think my domestic and international experience means that I've had to navigate all sorts of challenges around the delivery of all sorts of events, so that doesn't faze
to him personally. Would you take the Infantino approach? And we've all seen him kind of, I don't know, cozying up to him and cheering, like a cheerleader for this one will lead it.
My approach will be what I've always done, which is sit down and understand the motivations and try to communicate what we as an organisation are about. And I've always found that tends to work in my sphere.
Hoping that is a vote winner, and maybe he's trying to make athletics great again. We talked about the NFL and Trump going to the Super Bowl, but in the world of NBA, while we've been focused on transfer deadline day in European men's football, what about the NBA trade being forced to switch franchises?
Yeah, I mean, we normally talk about football transfers, and I'm no basketball expert here, but that story for me is just incredible. This is the trade of Luka Doncic from the Dallas Mavericks to the LA Lakers, with Anthony Davis moving the other way, plus a bunch of other things. They don't have paid-for transfers in the US. You get first picks in draft, etc. But what I found most striking was nobody knew about it. They kept it away from the agents. It looks like the players didn't even know they were being traded until right at the end. And that is just a whole world away. And the numbers, guys, are incredible when you look at this. Basketball has a CBA, which means the players get 50% of the total take of the league. That means these contracts are enormous. In Doncic's case, because he moved, he weirdly loses $100 million from a future contract. He's not going to be poor, but he was set to sign a $345 million contract had he stayed, because you have something called the Supermax. If you're loyal to your club and you're one of the best players, you can sign these enormous contracts. By moving, or in a sense, he doesn't have a choice. I mean, the LA Lakers are great, but he's going to lose this idea of getting this enormous contract. It's just a remarkable story. And the way that no one found out is also incredible in the world we live in today.
I mean, it all seems very much players being treated as commodities. We talk about that in football a lot, but it just seems like this is that to the nth degree. It's very, very, I mean, from this point of view, it looks very strange. And the fact he's losing so much money as well. Again, I mean, it's weird that there is not more player power which prevents that happening.
Well, great point from you, but unfortunately, we're sending you off to the Sports Agents pod now.
And you mean all my royalties from Sport Unlocked? I don't get those either.
You've been logged off.
You've been logged off. One more year, Ziegs, and you could have got this massive payout, but we've had to send you a year early.
But we get first pick, don't we, in the next signing?
That's right.
In the draft.
The Sports News draft.
It's not Graham Dunbar, is it?
I'm saying Gianni Infantino. I mean, this can seem crazy, can't it, to the outside world? And in the US, it has sparked quite a reaction. You can get a sense that normally the whole trading system is just accepted, but this is a case that seems to have actually sparked a lot of, you what? What's going on here? How can you suddenly be forced to move and no one knows about it, not even the players?
It's happens in baseball as well, apparently. You could be playing for a team on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday you could move to the opponent. You can move city. You're playing for somebody else. But the thing with the NBA, and guys, if you're listening and you're American and we're getting all this wrong, do write in. The salary scales are incredible. That's the other thing. I mean, we've said he's going to lose this $100 million, but this guy is already supremely wealthy. He's going to have a big fat contract. See, imagine Premier League football is getting half of everything by the rule that this is what you're going to get. There's no owners can only have 50% must go somewhere else. 50% must go to the players.
Well, I mean, we are in the middle of a potential big change to the transfer rules in football. I think there's discussion. There's a sort of FIFA task force. PFA have got legal action ongoing. FIFA Pro. We could see some big changes.
Well, Doncic himself said he had to check it was April the 1st.
And everybody was surprised, so you can imagine how surprised I was. I was almost asleep, so when I got a call, I had to check it was April 1st. I didn't really believe it at first, and it was a bit shock. It was hard moments for me. It was home, so it was really hard moments for me, especially the first day. But as I said, I get to play in the greatest club in the world, and I'm excited for this new journey.
Just a little more detail. This, I think, was from the AP, just to be clear here. It says here, Doncic was primed to sign a 5-year, $345 million a year Supermax extension with the Mavericks, the biggest in the league's history before he got traded. The NBA says such extensions are only for players who are re-signing with their former teams. With the move to the Lakers, he's no longer eligible for this lucrative deal. Instead, he can negotiate a shorter extension, 3 years at about $165 million, with the chance to be a free agent in 2028. I mean, $165 million is nothing to be sniffed at for 3 years, by the way, guys.
Certainly huge amounts there, even if it all seems a bit bizarre to us, but then so does MLS at times with its lack of promotion relegation. But in the world of football, there are so many legal challenges over the transfers. We've been talking on here for some time about what the future of the transfer market will look like. And, you know, we've seen FIFPro now going in for talks with FIFA, so maybe there's some attempt at peace there. But we don't really hear much from the players, do we, themselves?
No, they've talked about the sort of legal actions in relation to sort of too many matches and being overplayed, but not in terms of things like transfers so far, anyway.
And so where's it all heading? Do we know the time frame of where this legal action could be going? I mean, in England, there's now challenges over the attempted effective salary cap.
Yeah, interesting this. I mean, the Premier League this week has been hit with not one, but two separate, unconnected legal challenges. So
typical day in the Premier League now.
Well, exactly, yeah. So one is the PFA threatening legal action if they vote next week to bring in the squad cost control rules, which is similar to UEFA have, where you're limited to spending. In the Premier League, it's 85% of your revenues on player costs. And something else called anchoring, which we might have talked about before, where the top club is limited in its spending to the amount the bottom club in the Premier League earns in TV money. So the top club can only spend 5 times more than the bottom club earns on player wages and transfers. So PFA is saying to Premier League, this is potentially cutting players' earning potential, and it's against competition law. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is yet another Manchester City legal challenge against associated party transaction rules.
One to get onto, but maybe City's struggles this season put the Premier League in a position of strength to introduce such regulations in terms of competitive balance, because we see Nottingham Forest in 3rd place, Bournemouth in 7th, Aston Villa up there in 8th. So the fact it's been a less predictable top half of the table, even if Liverpool seem to be cruising towards the title, that they should feel perhaps emboldened that they know what they're doing, perhaps, in terms of bringing these regulations in to maintain that competitiveness.
It's been really good for the league, isn't it? Bournemouth, Nottingham Forest, and also these matches, they're ultra competitive as well now, aren't they? I think that's what the league should be selling to the world, and that's what it has this season, and they should be really proud of that. Just on to the Manchester City new, latest, whatever you want to use, legal claim. You just get the sense there's always going to be a legal claim from Manchester City, and it all just makes my mind go back to, the UEFA days, that email we read out. That's the strategy, the famous Simon Cliff email, was it, mentioning the chairman Khaldoon willing to spend however many 50 million on the 30 best lawyers or 30 on the best 50 and just keep suing UEFA, it was, for the next decade. This just seems to be what they want to do, and they're just going to keep doing that. And here we go, we've got another lawsuit. And just on the PFA lawsuit, again, we've seen this. This is the environment that FIFPro, the global players union, is on as well. It's been suing FIFA and UEFA over the calendar and other things. This is perhaps the litigation era we're in now.
Yeah, just to mention, the PFA did successfully block League One and League Two, the third and fourth divisions of English football, from bringing in a salary cap in 2021. So they have this sort of a precedent in being quite successful at this.
And certainly Manchester City had some success with theirs as well. They forced changes to the Premier League rules last year. They pointed out inconsistencies with shareholder loans not being considered as related party transactions, and particularly whether they have favourable rates, those loans.
They did it quite right. But this in November, the Premier League voted that 16 of the 20 clubs voted amendments on the basis of that tribunal. But even that's not good enough. Manchester City said that all the rules should have been regarded as null and void. And this is the latest legal challenge is to those amendments that were voted through. So it could just go on and on and on. And I'm sure when the 115 rule breach verdict comes out, if that's not to Manchester City's liking, there will be more legal challenges.
Some might call it the tyranny of the majority there, Ziggs.
Or the tyranny of the person with the largest bucket of cash that you can spend on lawyers.
But they're certainly muddying the waters here, aren't they? Making sure they're sort of throwing stuff at all the rules and regulations to find fault, ultimately, depending what happens in the far bigger case, to show there are issues with this entire regulatory framework, even if we're not referring to parts of the rules that even existed when this case began. I mean, it does relate the 115 case to 2009 onwards.
Yeah, I do think that this is sort of tactical, not just tactical in terms of getting the rules that they think are most favourable to them, i.e. giving more flexibility to do huge sponsorship deals, but actually tactical in challenging the competition organisers who try and thwart them by their various competition rules.
On the bigger case, City have always said they have an irrefutable body of evidence that will exonerate them. We have, though, in the winter transfer window, seen unusually high spending for City, about £180 million. They're not usually so big spenders in January. Is this a reaction to the slump on the pitch or fearing some looming sanction off the pitch?
It's a really interesting moment, that. And if you look at the profiles of the players, most of them are extremely young. So early 20s, 20, 21. And that makes you wonder whether buying all in bulk like they have now might be mitigation maybe for potential sanctions that involves transfer market ban maybe. Zeeks, we don't know what the punishments could be, Rob. Could a transfer market ban be a feature of anything the Premier League does?
Yeah, it could be. I think it's sort of prudent because that's what happened, I think, when the UEFA and their initial FFP settlement sanctions, whatever you want to call them, 10 or so years ago, that included transfer embargoes. So it could be that. So I think if you're somebody planning the future of Manchester City, obviously the way things have gone on the pitch, the squad needs refreshing. So that's definitely a case. And if you think there's a possible threat to you not being able to refresh the squad at some point in the future, then yes, you would do it now. Why wouldn't you? And the last time they signed anyone of significance in the January transfer window was Aymeric Laporte in 2018, I think, and now they've signed 4.
Yeah. Just another question, Rob. You mentioned Nottingham Forest there. They're doing really well this year. Now, Nottingham Forest have been one of the teams that have been with City in some of these votes, as have Aston Villa. Now these teams are prospering under the current rules. Do you think they're as anti the rules as they were back then?
It's just in Nottingham Forest might be the new anti-cartel.
Well, I'm just saying that the rules as they are have led to Nottingham Forest doing extremely well this season. Now, if they go back to, free spending, do what you like, will that work in Nottingham Forest's favour as they have now? It's just very interesting.
Because that was the sense why there was some perhaps depressed spending, those fears over the sanctions that came through last season for Everton and Nottingham Forest. So maybe there's a lot more caution in the transfer market. Manchester City's spending was an anomaly. Only Chelsea have spent as much in a January window in that sort of slightly frantic 2023 January. And we even saw Manchester United only spending 30 million on 2 players. They've talked about fears of breaching the profit and sustainability rules. And Manchester City did almost outspend all 19 rivals. But England was far and away in the spending in the January window. Meant the other leagues were nowhere near in Europe. Only Saudi Arabia was next, and certainly Aston Villa were ones to benefit from them spending again. John Duran joining from Aston Villa, so helped Villa register a profit of almost 70 in the transfer market. Even, they're trying to build on their position of strength in the Champions League, at least.
Yeah, I think Villa would say that they're being sort of thwarted by the Premier League rules, and actually they should be doing, they want to be doing better, but they're limited by the PSR rules. They had to sell John Duran to Saudi Arabia, to Al Nassr. So I think that's why they've been sort of opposing this, because they want to be able to, spend lots more than they're earning.
With John Duran, guys, there is also the fact that he wanted to play football and he was scoring goals but sat on the bench. They had a kind of a luxury problem, but it is very problematic when you have two centre forwards who can bang in the goals but only one can play. There was a market for John Duran, and off to Saudi Arabia he went. And that, for Saudi Arabia as well, buying a young player is also quite interesting. Maybe there's going to be a different trend in the Saudi transfer market as well. This guy is a very young man. He's going to be an extremely good player. He already is, and he's moved to Saudi Arabia. And the Premier League and Saudi are also a trend that is here to stay. Premier League was, in terms of Europe, seems it's like going to be far and away the top spender every transfer window.
Although certainly a lot of spending again from Saudi Arabia, where there was a sort of net spend overall of $160 million. Interestingly, this data coming from FIFA in terms of the international transfers, and it's a point to discuss because they headline their announcement: January 2025 transfer window breaks multiple records in both men's and women's football. I suppose that's a judgment in one sense. Is more spending a good thing or not by breaking records? Is it a sign of the health of the industry or financial issues?
Well, you could argue both ways, probably, couldn't you? I think generally it shows that there's sort of confidence and health. Certainly from a league which is a purely privately owned league, then you would say that was a sign of health.
Kieran Maguire, the football finance expert, pointed out that Premier League clubs owe £3.5 billion in outstanding transfer fees.
Yeah, I mean, that's the nature of the market as well. That's how these payments are staggered. I haven't seen a story of a Premier League club defaulting on their transfer payments. It's just how it works. But in terms of the FIFA announcement, I'm kind of torn on this, because FIFA has been talking about trying to tame the transfer market in some ways, trying to bring more logic in and more rationality. They've even put studies into getting rid of the transfer market as we know it. So it is quite strange to celebrate masses of spending on player trading, given what they want to do.
Yeah, a lot of that data also, showing in the women's game, the growth there, particularly showing how there was $2.3 million spent by clubs in England in women's football. So certainly, a sign of the growth of the women's game, with now transfers over $1 million. And if you listen back to our pod from a couple of weeks ago, we did have someone on from Deloitte, and she was running through all the numbers as well. Tariq, you are speaking from Kenya.
Major audit of the Kenyan Football Association's finances, new regime in, and they seem to have found multiple bank accounts with money going to all sorts of different places that make no sense to them. And huge. I think it's 400 million Kenyan shillings they're in debt with.
That sounds a huge number. Doing the conversion, it's about $3 million or £2.5 million. But in Kenyan local football terms, it is a significant amount.
Who's looking at this from an international point of view? What does an organisation like FIFA, which hands out money to national FAs like Kenya's, Gianni Infantino has massively increased those handouts. What is it doing in terms of its audits? Whenever new regimes come in, they seem to find either corruption or mishandling of FA finances. Shouldn't someone be looking at this?
And we've seen it in South America as well, in so many parts of the world. It's a question of how determined they are to uncover it, because it does create uncomfortable situations, although that's money ultimately disappearing from football.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're talking about all these new competitions, Club World Cups, and this guy meeting all these presidents and all the rest of it. But the actual essence of FIFA and football is 211 associations and developing and growing the game. If this money is being lost it isn't developing the game. So you hope, maybe someone somewhere one day will start casting a closer eye at these things.
Well, there is a lot of money coming from Africa, from Rwanda into football, but increasing questions about whether that is right and proper over the years, criticism over Rwanda's human rights record in terms of some of their sponsorships, but now their involvement with the rebels in Congo creating concern.
And for me, there's a certain inevitability to this happening with the Visit Rwanda sponsorship. They sponsor Arsenal in the Premier League, Bayern Munich in the Bundesliga, and PSG in France. These are obviously very significant football teams, and you raise the issues of Rwanda's human rights. When you allow a nation state, any country to sponsor you, there is a very, very good chance you're going to get dragged into whatever their politics are or whatever's going on. In this case, a very, very bloody situation in Goma, in the Congo, where the United Nations have said this rebel group is backed by Rwanda. The details are horrific, and we don't need to sort of labor on those, but it's a very nasty conflict. And if, these European football teams are plastered with the name of this country that is supposedly backing this stuff, and they have questions to answer, it seems they haven't answered really any of these questions at all yet. It's been a week or so.
And the British government has said that the aid that Rwanda receives is under threat. Prime Minister Keir Starmer is an Arsenal fan. I did try to ask him last year about how he reconciles the fandom, the Rwanda sponsorship, and his human rights advocacy. So maybe this will become increasingly problematic, but certainly for sport, with the sponsorship not only of Arsenal, but also Bayern Munich and Paris Saint-Germain, and complaints from the government in the Democratic Republic of Congo, writing to the owners of Arsenal, Paris Saint-Germain and Bayern, questioning the morality of those deals.
Yeah, answers that the Foreign Minister hasn't got. By the way, Keir Starmer's not the only Arsenal fan in this situation. Paul Kagame, the leader of Rwanda, is also a very big Arsenal fan. I remember him tweeting after a defeat. I can't remember. I think Mikel Arteta was the coach even then, after one heavy defeat. And Rwanda has also used football and sport in ways that a lot of African countries haven't. We've seen FIFA congresses. We went to that one in Rwanda not so long ago. There was a FIFA Council meeting, Rob, in 2018, I think. Gianni Infantino is a big advocate of Paul Kagame, and Kagame of Infantino as well. So again, sport and football in this case enmeshed in this nasty politics.
Gianni Infantino has actually spent the start of this week at the Vatican meeting the Pope. Thomas Bach was also there. It was a children's advocacy event. I'm not clear what actually was achieved there. It seems some quite vague messaging about wanting to help children.
Yeah, well, there you go. Again, these guys acting or wanting to be seen as statesmen on a global stage. And I guess sport, with its platform, used the right way, may help in some causes. But again, we don't know what they've actually achieved just yet through these meetings.
Refereeing in Spain, Real Madrid, they're prone to sending out angry letters, aren't they, quite often? This latest one to La Liga.
Yeah, this is kind of nuts, because this is not some tin pot team with a crazy president in that sense. Although, depending on your view on Florentino Perez, this is Real Madrid, symbolic club, basically accusing La Liga of being corrupt, essentially, and having referees purposely give decisions against this all-powerful football team. It's absolutely nuts. And Javier Tebas, obviously, it's Javier Tebas, has fired back just as emphatically, saying Real Madrid think they're above everyone and everything else, or words to that effect. But it's quite nasty and quite tawdry, isn't it?
And it can have dangerous repercussions if it makes referees the target. We've seen how they've been surrounded, harassed in public places in other parts of the world. It does discredit them, doesn't it, when they're so vital to the game?
Yeah, I mean, the words in the letter was remarkable. They said this culmination of a completely discredited refereeing system. Decisions against Real Madrid have reached a level of manipulation and adulteration that can no longer be ignored. I mean, it's just crazy stuff. I mean, this is all basically because they said somebody who scored a winning goal against them they believe should have been sent off for a tackle on Mbappe, and I've looked at the challenge, and it was definitely a yellow card, but it wasn't a huge contact. So it's just just ludicrous piling pressure on referees. It's clearly a tactic, and they should be ashamed of themselves.
Hard-hitting comment there. Well, as we close up perhaps on some cricket, and for those less familiar, perhaps those just utterly confused by the sport of cricket, in recent years, another format of the game has come in. So you might be used to the 5-day test format. Then there's the 1-day format. Then there's 2020, where they play 20 overs each. And then England introduced the 100. And certainly it's something that they're trying to cash in on, isn't it? Because the franchises that were set up away from the usual county system have become lucrative commodities. They've been selling off the shares in them.
Yeah, this is the numbers here make no sense. The mind absolutely boggles. The one that was the biggest sale, this is a team called the London Spirit. This league is only a couple of years old. These teams have come out of thin air, essentially, with this format. The revenue generated by this team is about £2 million. But this group of American tech investors or American tech entrepreneurs and businessmen, including folks from Google and Facebook, etc., have spent or put a bid in that's been accepted about £145 million for 49% of this team, which would value this team that has no physical assets, no permanent players, at £300 million.
Because they do play at Lord's, perhaps the most famous cricket ground in the world, but they'll buy no infrastructure from this deal.
They don't own Lord's, do they, guys? They'll be using the pitch.
So that's the thing with all these franchise auctions. No one's getting any physical infrastructure. You're just getting the rights to the men's and women's teams.
I mean, it's jaw-dropping. I mean, this is basically because they're looking at what's happened with the Indian Premier League and thinking this can be replicated in England. And that's why a lot of IPL franchises have bought the similar franchises in England.
The Ambani family, they've bought 49% of the Oval Invincibles for about £60 million. The Sunrisers Hyderabad ownership have bought the Northern Superchargers for £100 million. That's the Yorkshire team.
That was Ziegs, your local lot, Ziegs. They're the first team that has 100% sale, right? So the way it worked is 49% of a franchise was up for sale, and then it was up to each of these counties, in this case Yorkshire, if it wanted to sell the remaining 51%, and they bid at the offer, didn't they?
They've got financial issues, Yorkshire, so that's not particularly surprising that they went for that. But no, I think it's jaw-dropping. Be interesting to see how it turns out, where we are in 5 years' time.
Also, 70% of the Manchester Originals going to another Indian group, the RPSG, for about £80 million. And Knightshead Capital, who own Birmingham City Football Club, getting 49% of Birmingham Phoenix for £40 million. Yeah, perhaps the big one to watch, the Ambani family, because we've seen how heavily involved they are with the IOC, perhaps trying to bring the Olympics to India in 2036 to Ahmedabad. But certainly the big growth market for fans and for commercial opportunities, particularly as the Ambanis get involved. Maybe Donald Trump would become a fan of the Oval Invincibles.
Maybe, but when I see this, I don't see this as value propositions at all. You mentioned the Ambanis. They're worth so much. It's just they're worth, multiple billions of dollars. And, when these groups are dropping this much money, it just feels like rich person wants to buy something. They're in an auction with each other. No one wants to lose. And this is what's happened. It's hard to see business logic. Just seems like there is so much money in the wallets of some of these guys. This is the prize they wanted, and they're going to pay for it at any cost.
You wonder how the Premier League are viewing this. So much money coming from India into cricket is not coming into football at the moment.
Yeah, maybe there'll be a legal challenge to make sure that India does have a role to play.
So a lot of sports we've managed to get through in this week's episode. Tariq, out in Kenya, what's the most visible sport? Which football team's most supported?
Manchester United, despite all of their travails, that shirt, whether it's one of the old ones or the new ones, Manchester United is clearly a heavy favourite in this country, maybe this region.
They've still got that brand loyalty. as hopefully we do as well. Well, you can message us at Sport Unlocked on X, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, and message us sportunlockedpod@gmail.com. And in the pod description is the WhatsApp channel where you can get updates on our latest episodes too. But for now, thank you for listening. Goodbye.